This is the Honda Prologue E all-wheel drive in Elite trim. It's basically the range-topping variant of the Honda Prologue, which is available in North America in a choice of front or all-wheel drive configurations. And earlier this year, I was among a group of journalists that was lucky enough to test drive this car, or rather, one of its pre-production siblings, in a beautiful vineyard setting in Central California ahead of the car's launch. And during my first drive report, I had some really nice things to say about it. I quite liked it.
Which is funny, because I've been driving this car for the past few days, and like is not one of the words I would use to describe the experience.
Yep, this one's going to be contentious. It's one of those rare occasions where we actually disagree. This is very different to the beautiful sunny landscape where I first drove this car earlier this year. And I'm not sure if it's the fact that, as is always the case, Honda wines and dines you and puts you up in a nice hotel and finds really nice routes for you to travel along. This is not the same car that I drove in California. It is still very competent, but not in the ways that I perceived in California. So, if you'll allow me, I said that I thought this was like an American car that had gone to Japanese finishing school, and it felt pretty sorted. It was the better of the Ultium-based EVs that all share a similar size, so like the Blazer and the Equinoxes. It was the better of those. And it went round corners nicely, it felt very poised, very balanced, the suspension felt good. And I don't know if the car I was driving was one that had been, tuned up specifically for the press drive. But this car's got 1,430 miles on it. It feels looser. It's a little bit noisier. We've already lost some trim panels, which may or may not be a side effect of the fact that this is a press fleet vehicle. And you've picked out a whole load of flaws with it, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, you when you described the Prologue to me, I was quite excited to drive it, and then I got in this car and I was like, is this the same car? Because honestly, one of the most egregious things about the way it drives for me is the way that it understeers fairly persistently, which is fine, understeer is fine, except it will then suddenly tuck in and oversteer fairly dramatically in a way that just, I'm going to be a bit mean here, but it reminds me of like a 70s Marina. And this is an all-wheel drive car. It should not behave like that. But the first time I encountered it is a set of lights in my home city where I was turning, and it's a fairly sharp turn and it's a fairly quick road, and I stopped at the lights and then I moved off with not a lot of alacrity, because I have to say this is also not the quickest vehicle, and I was suddenly found that I was not on the course that I thought I was going to be on around that corner. And today, when I was driving it down, I took it on a twisty road, not the twisty road I most commonly use, but another one. And I just found that I kept missing the line on corners because it didn't go where I thought it was going to go.
The other thing that gets me, right, okay, I put my foot down now. It doesn't feel like it's going as briskly as it did when I last tried using it.
Yeah, and I'm fine with a vehicle that is a little more prosaic. Like, this is a family vehicle. It doesn't need to be super quick.
Right.
But it honestly feels slower than cars that I've driven with less power. This is like 288 horsepower. And it feels more like a 200 horsepower car.
I think some of that is the fact that this is a heavy, big car.
Oh, yeah.
I parked this next to my Chevrolet Bolt this week, and the size difference is quite astonishing.
Yeah, and you get some of that in the back. Like, the rear legroom is very good. The space up front doesn't feel that huge. But breadth-wise, like, it is a broad vehicle, and it doesn't feel like it's giving you that space inside. And I think a lot of that is down to the packaging of the components, because when you look under the hood, there is a massive engine bay, of which 2 foot of it is basically empty space, not taken up with a frunk. You don't get a frunk, but just void, where you go, well, if you'd have packaged the rest of these components a bit better and maybe worked a bit more to refine them, you could have made this car either shorter or given the cabin more space.
I am at a loss to explain why this feels different. It's not a bad car.
No, I know I'm ranting a bit. But
you are ranting, and it's not a bad car. It's not in the Mazda MX-30. It's not in the Lexus 450e. Yeah, it's a competitive option for a lot of vehicles in the marketplace. So I could see this cross-shopping against the Volkswagen ID4. Personally, I would pick this over the Volkswagen, if only because you've got physical blinking buttons, whereas the ID4 is all haptic touchscreen nonsense. The touchscreen display is responsive and does what it needs to do, although there are some issues in this particular press vehicle that weren't present in the original car I drove. And again, that's down to how this car has been set up versus the press car I drove. But it is a real, like, this has only happened twice in my career. Once with the Nissan Ariya and once with this.
And when you were talking about the center console, mostly it has behaved fine for me. I know that our DP had more issues with it than I had. Mm-hmm. But, for example, this morning when I started driving, I had no heating. And I had no Android Auto. And I gave it about 7 or 8 minutes because I drove to my local coffee stand to get coffee to come down here and breakfast, because doing things early. So I pulled up to the coffee stand and it was still blowing ambient outside temperature air at me. And the only warm thing was the heated seat. And after a few minutes of sitting at the coffee stand, I was like, right, we're going to just turn it off, turn it back on. And at that point, I regained Android Auto, which my phone was saying, I'm connected to the car, but the car was saying, I can only do Bluetooth, I can't do Android Auto. And then the heat came on. And I was like, oh, we have heat again. But that is not something I expect in a production automobile. That's something I expect in a pre-production automobile.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not sure if this is a pre-production car or a production car. I have a suspicion that this is a production vehicle and that the vehicle I drove at the launch was actually a pre-production, or perhaps a production validation.
Yeah.
Because they tend to put the production validations on press fleets. And the fact that this has only got 1435 on it in terms of miles, and the actual press drive took place in this very early spring, I find it very unlikely that this car was at that press launch event. So I suspect this was a production vehicle that came off the production line and maybe had a different quality control procedure than the production intent ones. That wouldn't surprise me one little bit.
Yeah.
So when you put your foot down, you do get a decent amount of power delivery. If you're starting from standstill, there is a slight delay. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, it has a little bit of I want to call it turbo lag.
It does feel like turbo lag, doesn't it?
But yeah, I mean, like a lot of vehicles, it has that kind of slight lag before delivering the power, which I think helps people who are more used to gasoline vehicles, which obviously cannot immediately deliver all their power. And I think, you know, I sound very negative about this car, and part of that is that I feel like it's a pretty mediocre entry into the field of electric vehicles and that you could do much better. But it is a perfectly fine vehicle for a lot of people who are not super interested in driving. They just need an A to B box.
Yeah, if you're driving within the bounds of normal everyday use, where you're not interested in being a spirited driver. And I think that's kind of where I was on the original review of this when I did the first drive. This is not a car that's going to kind of beg you to take it out and spank it on the open road, like the BMW i4 M60 or the Kia EV6 GT.
Yeah.
Or, and we got a lot of criticism from our Ioniq review, the Ioniq 5N, which even though we were critical of some of the silly toys, still wanted you to drive it, and it wanted you to drive it harder. This is a car that's not designed for that, and I think we would be really disingenuous to complain about, oh, it doesn't handle very well and it doesn't, you know. It's not. It's a family. This is an alternative to a family car to get you around, to allow you to hopefully get your kids to school safely, to get you to work, to run your errands, to go to the store, to do shopping. It's a pretty decent sized boot.
Yeah, it has plenty of room back there. And again, if you have older kids, then the legroom in the back is going to be appreciated a lot because it is a larger vehicle.
And as long as you're not spanking it, the wheels do what you ask them to do. Like, I don't feel, it's not like the Hummer where I wasn't sure where the wheels were, right? I know where the wheels are in this car, and it actually gives me a bit of confidence that it's just going to do the thing. In terms of, you know, feel, and it doesn't necessarily feel exclusively like a Honda. It doesn't drive like a Honda.
No. I mean, it kind of drives like what it is, which is a GM vehicle at its heart.
And this is not a derogatory statement. It's a GM in drag.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fettled GM. It's prettied up a little bit, and
that's 60.
Yeah, I mean, it can be reasonably brisk, but it is not gonna give you a exciting drive. And the sport mode is, I couldn't really tell that I was in sport mode.
Let's talk about Regen, because we've got it up right now.
We do have it up right now, and it has one pedal driving. The one pedal drive is pretty good, actually. I will grant that in terms of bringing you to a stop nice and smartly, one pedal drive does work. It also has a lower vigor setting, which is, quotes, normal. Yeah, see, no, don't. It just doesn't want to. And then obviously you can just turn it off and have regular, like, drive like you would a gas car. A lot of this is hidden in this menu system, which you can add.
Yeah, so you can set it so that it will display on the top of the screen, which I really like. So if we scroll back here, it's actually showing up here, right? And if you hit it, that turns off single pedal, and then that turns it back on.
Yeah, which is a really nice feature. It's nicely placed. If someone can explain to me why on earth they thought putting the light switch for the headlamps on the top of that screen instead of, say, anywhere else in the driver's cluster, I would like to speak to the UI designer who thought that was good.
You want to speak to the manager?
I do.
Are you driving this in a way so that you go into the corner, you set the steering, and then you modulate the throttle, or are you steering differently?
I think I am varying how I am steering because I feel like it does not follow the line I expect it to.
So you see, I almost exclusively drive this with my throttle. I almost exclusively steer with my throttle. So
See, I did that, and then I hit the oversteer, and then I got very wary of it because it does it all the time.
and it's kind of bumpy,
It is kind of bumpy, which.
but it's better than the Hummer.
I mean, yes, it is. The ride is better than the Hummer. It does have a little bit of harshness at some points, which I think is really that struggle because the US automakers and by extension Honda, who are partnering with a US automaker for this vehicle, have gone for, we will put the biggest battery in this thing that we can and screw the efficiency. And that means that you then have to deal with a lot more weight, which means that you have a lot more compromises in the way that the vehicle handles and a lot more compromises in the way that it rides.
I can make good progress. I wouldn't necessarily say that good progress is always sure-footed. How about that? And looks like someone up here didn't make that corner. Is that
there
a Honda?
are two.
Oh dear. Tell me how you feel about coming down this really fairly steep road.
I don't feel unsafe. Like, it's not. This is not an FSO Polonaise. This isn't a you go 45. Like, you go more or less where you point. It's a little bit vague, and it doesn't always go where you want to, and it didn't do it that time because I didn't let it, but that flip between, I'm going to understeer, oh no, you've gone too far. And look, it's not a car that you want to push. That's my opinion of it.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. And I think I said as much on the actual event. It's like, it will go around corners briskly, it will do mountain passes if you ask it to, but it's not a car that says, push me harder, daddy.
It's not a yes and, it's a, oh, if I must.
Yes, it almost, it almost reminds me of like, I don't know, I want to say it's like a Vogon. It will do it, but it will complain if you don't have all the forms signed in triplicate.
Yeah. Although I will say the one thing about doing this mountain descent is it does also reveal one of my real pet bugbears, which is completely unrelated to the handling, but it's the cup holders,
yes,
which are
wobble,
atrocious.
wobble, 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 wobble. Well, it's designed for American big gulps, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know who did it, but I've had cup holders that at least vaguely hold my bottle, and then just minor aside, I took the bottle, which is currently wobbling around and trying to escape, and put it in the door because I thought, well, okay, it does fit in the door pocket. The only problem is that then it managed to tuck itself in such a way that I needed two hands to remove it. So I know that doesn't relate to the driving, but these corners are an excellent place to show that off. And I realise it's a really minor niggle, but it's one of those things.
The other thing that's worth noting here is that, like a lot of EVs, the auto hold button is squirreled and hidden off somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you even know where it is?
It's down there.
It's down there, right.
Where the headlight switch should be.
Where the headlight switch should be, but also down there, I think, is something to do with turning the lane keep assist off.
Yes.
And a GM-style manual slider for light control, which I like.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the touchscreen infotainment system, right? I like the font they've used. It's very readable. Much better than the silly skeuomorphic, looks like it was designed in a school break session by a 15-year-old wannabe automotive designer that the Hummer EV has. This is very nice and clear. It's very easy. Obviously, it interfaces with the Ultium platform, so that there are some similarities. I think it's probably just a skin. But the charge screen is nice. Okay, it tells you where the next charging is going to be. If you hit this gear icon, just like the Ultium vehicles that have GM badges or GMC badges, you have the fast charge button, prep for fast charging. That was a criticism we had in the Audi Q8 e-tron, that we couldn't find that button at that point. So we've got that. You've got the music button here that gives you all the choices of the different places you can listen to entertainment. You've got the phone button, where you can manage your Bluetooth connections, and importantly, you have the option to have Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. And then, as you can see, this is reasonably responsive. You've got your ambient lighting here that you can change. You can change the different setups, and you can link it to the drive mode. That's kind of a hint of if you want it to be more performance oriented and you want it to be red. You can have it red. You could have it trans pride colors if you wanted. I like that the AC buttons here are controllable on the screen, in addition to, you know, the discrete defined buttons down here. These are actually software defined buttons that can be modified slightly. I'm not a fan of these buttons per se. They look like they're going to attract a lot of dirt. You commented that you felt that the quality of these weren't very good.
Yeah, I think my issue here is, one, I mean, we all know I hate piano black, but if you're gonna do piano black, you really need the molding to be absolutely perfect. And you look at these and you can just see that there's some filling defects and the surface texture isn't perfectly smooth. You get a lot of weird light reflections on them. The buttons themselves feel okay to me. They're not, I mean, compared to, say, the Hummer EV, this is a massive step up.
Yes.
But compared to, say, some of the other models on the market, I would say they are just not great.
Most people wouldn't give a flying rat's doodad about those buttons there in the middle. As long as the buttons do what they want them to, they are happy. I am a nerd and I'm neurospicy. I have to have a logic to the buttons in order for them not to irritate me. If the things I want to access, which I will acknowledge are not always the things that other people want to access, are 5 layers deep or squirreled away in buttons that feel like they've been put there because they forgot they needed to find a space to put that thing, it will irk and irritate me no end.
Well, and I think that is one of the things that annoys me about the light switch being up here.
Right.
And the fact that I discovered that because I was driving home for the first time at night and found this screen a bit bright and was like, oh, well, there's a light thing. That must control the light level of the screen. That's really nice. Pressed it and then turned the headlamps off on our highway, which did not, an unlit highway as well. So that did not make me a happy bunny.
So I want to ask your thoughts, Kate, on connectivity for this vehicle. Not Android Auto and on all of that stuff, but the expectation that when buying this car, you're going to be buying a software-defined and software-connected vehicle whose telematics are essential to convenient operation of the vehicle.
I mean, this is something that we have seen from every automaker, effectively, which is value extraction from you, because obviously they can mine that data, they can mine the metadata, they'll know where you go, they know the kinds of places you go, when you go, the kinds of places you shop, and why, you know, all these things can be used to guess really pretty accurately the why of why you're doing something. And yes, that's that, you know, I've ranted at great length about that. As a user of this vehicle, and one that is using it in demo mode or as a guest driver, it certainly leads to the frustrating situation that a lot of stuff resets between you getting in and out of the vehicle. So as a driver, if this is your car, you are going to either have to tolerate that, which is kind of irritating because every time you get in, it says, hey, you need to download the maps. But you first have to agree to sharing location data. But you first have to do this. And there's like a bunch of warnings and alerts and agreements that you have to go through.
Right.
So as a driver, as with some of the other vehicles we've tested recently, you are required to set up an account if you're going to use the vehicle in any meaningful way as your daily vehicle.
Obviously, if you don't want to use the built-in, baked-in system that GM is forcing its customers to use, then this is a better alternative, because you're basically buying a GM vehicle with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. And for that, you know, it starts about $54,000 US if you buy the front-wheel drive variant, and goes all the way up to like 57-ish, this before incentives. for this version, right?
Yeah, it's about 57k. And I think that's, I think it's expensive, but I think pretty much all the EVs that are on sale in the North American continent are expensive.
Are more expensive than they should be. And that means obviously being able to use the benefits of the Ultium charging system. It charges much faster than previous GM EV battery systems. This is not a double stack battery pack. It's not the 800 volt battery. It's the same battery pack that you find in some of the other Ultium based EVs of a similar size. You do get plug and charge, which is nice. You can use this with a Tesla supercharger already. I've had several people confirm that even though officially they're not supported yet, if you rock up and you have a Tesla account, you use the Tesla app. As far as the supercharger is concerned, this is a GM vehicle, so GM has access. So that's nice. But the thing that I keep coming back to is that I have a 2017 Chevrolet Bolt EV with a 66 kilowatt hour battery pack and an EPA range of 250 miles. This is much larger in terms of battery capacity. It's pushing 80, 90 kilowatt hours, and its range is not much better.
I have a 2019 Kia Niro EV with 60 something kilowatt hours of battery pack, 64 I think, and that manages 250 miles on a charge and nearly 300 in the summer. And part of that is down to this kind of arms race that we've got into with EVs in the US, particularly in North America. This seems to be a particularly a North American attribute, which is that we just have to have bigger wheels, we have to have a bigger vehicle, the whole thing has to be larger.
And I think we have to acknowledge, Kate, that drive towards larger vehicles, while we wouldn't really enjoy acknowledging it, I think it is down in part to our generation and their expectations for people who are parents. So we regularly hear from people on this channel who criticize us for criticizing larger vehicles, saying, oh, those aren't large vehicles, I can't fit my kids and their gear in it. And to that, as two Brits who grew up in the 70s, 80s and 90s, I want to just remind you all that in the UK, we were growing up with cars that today would be considered subcompact. Both our parents, our siblings, maybe some pets, all bundled in, managed to get all of our gear in, and we managed to do everything we needed to. And if we needed to carry some extra stuff, I don't know about you, but you'd either rent a larger vehicle or you'd whack a roof rack on top.
I think there is a tendency to fill the space that you have.
Yes.
So, and I do this with a handbag. Like, I have a handbag, it will be full. It doesn't matter what size it is. Like, I currently have quite a small bag because that's what I want, and it's full. But the bag that it replaced was nearly 3 times as large, and
Right.
that bag was also full.
Right.
But I survive with what I have because this is the space that I have, and then I work out what I need. And I think we've got very used to the fact that, well, we'll just buy a bigger car, we'll buy a bigger house, we'll buy more space. And this degenerates into a climate rant, which is that we can't keep doing that.
No.
We need to be more respectful of the resources that we have, and I don't think this is.
In a book, the prologue is the bit at the beginning, right? It sets you up for the story ahead.
Yeah.
It sets you up for what we can expect, the good things, the bad things, maybe might introduce you to some of the characters, to get you excited about what the future holds in the story, right? There's been some really good prologues that I've read over the years.
Yeah, there is definitely a history of the prologue being that moment that you start getting into the novel.
I mean, did your novel have a prologue?
Actually, no, it doesn't.
Well, it's so good, it doesn't need one.
It doesn't need one, no.
But look, Honda was very explicit about picking this name, Prologue. The thing that comes first, the thing that starts it all, right? While conveniently ignoring the actual vehicles that came before.
Are you thinking of the Fit?
The EV Plus,
Yeah.
the Honda Fit,
Yeah.
which, by the way, exceptional car. Everything you need in an EV, right? Small, practical, fun around town, chuckable, much better than the petrol version,
Yeah.
but it was only a fleet vehicle and it was destroyed.
Yes.
With, you know, no judgment on Honda, everybody was doing it at the time.
No, I mean, I have judgment, but
Yes,
my
I have
judgment is
judgment.
broadly spread across the
Yes.
entire industry.
Then we had the Clarity EV.
Yeah.
The less said about that, the better. This is better than the Clarity EV.
I mean,
You take it from me. This is better than the Clarity EV, which isn't saying much.
I was going to say it's a pretty low bar to cross.
It is a pretty low bar to cross, but you know what? This is better, at least based on what Johnny Smith said, than Honda's European offering, the EN whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we said in the beginning of this video, Kate, that this is basically a GM in drag, right?
Yeah. I think when you said that, we were thinking it's maybe had a few nips and tucks.
Can't believe you went there. Okay, yes, but they've been affirming to the Honda brand. Okay, so the interior, very Honda.
Yes.
It's comfortable, it's quiet on the freeway. It doesn't scream GM unless you are someone who knows that GMs are the ones with the OnStar buttons in, right? It's got OnStar.
Yeah.
It's part of the deal that they had with GM. The infotainment system has mercifully been given a Honda skin and added features that the GM vehicles don't have.
Yeah, it has Android Auto and it has CarPlay, which God only knows why GM decided to remove.
Because they could extract more money out of the customer.
I understand that, but also there's a point at which that becomes self-defeating when customers are like, well, I'll pick the Honda, it's got...
And look, yes, we've just come to the end of October and Honda has set another record for the sales of this car. It is shifting them really quickly. Buyers are lining up to get behind the wheel of this.
Yeah, and I can understand why it is not a car for me. Like, we
It's too big for
established
you,
that in
right?
the review. It's too big, I don't like the handling. There are many things. But for many people who want a box that carries them from A to B without too much fuss,
Yes.
that doesn't need to do like the traffic light Grand Prix, this is a perfectly fine vehicle. It's a very unremarkable vehicle. It's a vehicle which in 10 years' time, I will probably not remember that I drove it. But
I hope you do.
I've driven a lot of cars over the years. But it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
I think though, Kate, the reason why you and I have a different view about this car is that I've never expected this to be a lifestyle vehicle. It is not. It's not happy taking you up into the mountains every weekend during ski season. I mean, it'll do it. This fits into that same point in the marketplace as the Nissan Ariya. It's your corporate daily driver. You're gonna take the kids to school, or maybe you don't have kids anymore. Maybe you're heading towards retirement, wondering what the point of it all is. It sits in your single car garage in your nice little ticky-tack home where all the doors and windows are the same because homeowners association and your grass has to be this tall. This is not derogatory to anybody who lives in a home like that, but this is where this will be seen, right? It's not a car for someone who wants to stand out. It's not a car for someone who wants to have fun driving. It's a car for someone for whom driving is a means to an end, from A to B. Just get me there safely, get me there I don't really care how efficient or inefficient it is, as long as my bum feels nice and comfortable in the seat, as long as the things inside work the way I want them to, and as long as I can take it to a dealership that I trust, which for many people is going to be a Honda. This is a transitional vehicle for people who are already Honda customers, not a conquest vehicle for the brand. The Honda Fit EV was a good conquest vehicle for the brand because it got a whole load of people who had been in small compact cars into the EV space, but that's something else. No, it's a very Reginald Perrin car. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them in our Discord chat room, on our Patreon page, or you can reach out to us using Mastodon or Blue Sky. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel using Patreon and YouTube, helping us cover our bills, pay our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. We've had so many headaches with our credit list in the last few months. I'm sorry, it's been down to a non-functioning program we were using to pull the list out, but today's list has been manually generated, so please do let us know if you're not on there and should be. We are, after all, only human-ish. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Steve Abernathy, Mike Nichols, Zach Kane, Philip Atkins, Kat, Rob Thomas, Ryan S., Laura, Jay Alor, Celia Gonzalez, France G. France, Nicole Huang, oh yeah, Pedro Huget, Duran Valentine, Winfred Gerlach, John Trindle, Sarah Hendrika Biketon, Edward Kufka, Stephen Beatty, Jonathan Rees, MJY, Owen Patrick, and Gail Jackson. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your moment of fame. And remember, you can also now gift membership to someone else. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations. And we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. The address is listed below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store also in the down below. We've got some fantastic content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you very soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think that you should look at this one. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!